welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about 3 British horror movies. As we're up to Halloween, I thought it'd be quite good to see some, I've got one famous one kind of semi-famous one, and one like probably you've never heard of. So I think it's a nice mix. So you have Dark Eyes of London, which is a Bela Lugosi in London movie, which is probably one you've never heard of, unless you're a genre fan. You have Dead of Night, the famous one. This is a portmanteau film. And you've got Doomwatch, based on a TV show, released in the 70s. Did not do well commercially. All 3 of these films are worth looking at. But I'll cover each one individually. So Dark Eyes of London, that's a nice little box set we've got here. You get basically from networks that's no longer in existence, but maybe be able to get this like on eBay or something. In the box you get an interview with Kim Newman and Stephen Jones about Bela Lugosi films when he was making British films, and you also get do a commentary for the film as well. And this is based on an Edgar Wallace story, which has been made multiple times in Germany. It was, as was pointed out in this film, it's Bela Lugosi actually getting some respect in Britain, which he was not getting in America at the time. In America, he was doing supporting parts for Universal, barely paid, and he was also doing like trashy, like zero budget films in New York. So this is a chance to come over just before the war started and do a horror movie. And fortunately for Lugosi, the war started, so basically a new potential income thing was lost for him because he couldn't get into London safely to go and shoot more movies. He had to stay in London or go to America again. So he was in America as the war went on, and he was just doing trashy movies for a while in America. So he would get an odd Universal film, but his career wasn't what it was in the 30s. But Dark Eyes of London was a film where he got to play 2 characters, and he got to play basically... Well, it was basically one character playing another character, and also he got to work with some British actors and get a bigger part who would be getting on these other movies at the time. They would just use his name basically to exploit the name. And he's fun in this one. It's not a great film, but it's an enjoyable film. It's one of those things. It's like, it's short, and it's got a good idea at the centre of it. Basically, the idea of insurance fraud, where Lugosi plays this guy who was a scientist who is now was discredited. So now he works as an insurance guy within London, and some of the clients he insured have died, and he's been claiming the insurance money through a third party in the background. So he's a cover insurance for something else. Someone else pays him out when these people die. So I think it's based on an insurance scam that was happening, but I'm not sure if there were any murders taking place, but that was an insurance thing where insurance scams could happen. So Edgar Wallace was interested in all that kind of stuff. And basically it's a setup for some murders, but also Lugosi is working with this Institute for the Blind, where this guy also plays Lugosi, runs that, and guess what? They're both the same person. In the original novel they were brothers, but in this one they're the same person. There's obviously Lugosi in a wig and been dubbed by someone else because you couldn't mistake Lugosi's voice. But it's still enjoyable. It's a bit hamming, but it's enjoyable. Lugosi's with other actors he can work with, he can get some longer dialogue scenes with. So, and it's atmospheric. There's all this stuff, these blind guys who are, victims of Lugosi's schemes, but also getting money from him to do little things here or there. The cops, which is basically a British policeman and an American who brought a guy over who is tied to Lugosi's scheme as a forger. They investigate and eventually figure out Lugosi's been behind all these murders, and they send a woman in undercover to investigate it as well. And so obviously she gets in danger. One of the blind guys is killed, which causes another blind guy who's one of the major heavy for Lugosi to turn on his master. And there's some nice scenes of just the blind guys, and there's also some chaos when all hell breaks loose with these blind people in this blind asylum. And Lugosi's trying to escape. It's a lot of fun, a lot of hokum, but it is enjoyable. It's really well put together, comedy put together. It's not the greatest script, and isn't the great actors, but they're all kind of decent. And it's one of those things is you could see a better film in there if they'd spent a lot more time in the script, but it was still well done. And it is fun to see Lugosi in a British film, but it is the kind of weakest of the three by a long way. But it's still a film I'd happily rewatch. I mean, it's still really enjoyable. You can spot the twist coming a mile away. It's like everything I've described, you can spot in 10 minutes in this film. You know exactly where it's going. But it's still enjoyable watching it get there. You know, it's just there's no surprises, but just watching the story unfold is quite enjoyable. But it looks very weak compared to Dead of Night, which came out 5 years later, but could have come out, you know, decades later for how much more advanced it is in storytelling and craft. You know, it's a much higher level of filmmaking. It's easily the best of the three I'm talking about. It's basically Alien before they went into comedy. They were coming off doing much more social realist films during the war, and they were trying to kind of expand a little bit, so they were going into fantasy for this one film. And a lot of actual comedies have fantastic elements. You know, The Man in the White Suit feels like an extension of this because it's a scientific thing, but it's still a very magical scientific thing that causes all these havocs. You know, Lady Killers has a kind of slightly supernatural feel about how other people die. A lot of stuff starts here that floats through, even though it didn't do a full-on horror film again. So it's a portmanteau, which means there's a bunch of stories, all with a linking narrative at the centre. But in this case, the linking narrative is wonderful. The linking narrative is complicated. What it is basically a guy goes to a country house for a job. He sees people in the country house waiting, just having a chat, and he realises he's dreamt this before. He knows what people are going to say before they say it, and he's just creeped out by the whole thing. And you've got one guy who's a psychiatrist who's saying, no, it's just a bit of madness, it's not reality. And then they start telling supernatural stories to each other, how different things have happened to them. And as the story goes on in the main section, it keeps on going, you see everybody's had a supernatural tale to tell, and everyone's believing something's off. The good thing about this is the supernatural tale pays off really well. It really does. It builds slowly to the revelations of what's going on, and it pays off, and there's a creepy finale to it, and it just works. It really works. It would still work if you just ripped it off, because it's just a sense of it's a supernatural tale in itself. So you've got a supernatural tale, and then within that supernatural tale, you've got these other supernatural tales. So they've all kind of power in the main central tale. And the tales themselves are terrific, with one exception. And even that one, it's execution rather than its story idea that's a problem. So we start off with a slight tale about a guy who was a motor racer who's got this feeling of impending doom. He sees this guy in a hearse looking up at him from the window. It's almost a portent of doom. And then as he's about to go on a bus to leave the hospital after his accident, he sees the guy again, and room for one more, and he stays away from the bus drives away and there's a crash. So he narrowly escapes death, which kind of creeps him out. It's a very short sequence, but it's really nicely done, and it's quite creepy. And that's the thing about this film is a lot of the stuff is just nicely creepy without having to go over the top. It becomes an accumulation of creepy things that happen that just works for the film. It's confidence doesn't need to be terrifying. It knows that basically just being creepy consistently is more of an effect, because it's trying to do a kind of ghost story thing rather than a massive gore fest, which you can do those days anyway. So next, it's all very British ghost stories. Next you have one of my favourites. It's the Christmas story, where a girl tells a story of she was at a Christmas party with her friends. They're doing hide and seek. She goes to hide, and which leads her, trying to find this place, leads her further and further into the house, into this room with this little boy sitting saying his sister's been cruel to him. She puts him to bed, leaves the room, comes back downstairs, and asks the boy, and says, "What boy?" And she says what his name is, and he goes, "He was murdered like a century ago." And it's this creepy ghost story. It just works wonderfully. Just the sense of this big party, Christmas party, everything's in this massive house, and how it develops and slowly builds to this payoff. It just works wonderfully. Alberto Cavalcanti directed this one, and the famous one from this pack of stories. So he was at the star of Dead of Night, and some weeks he did some of the best stuff. But Basil Dearden did the wraparound story, which is also terrifically done. Then we have a story about a haunted mirror, which is nicely done. It's not my favourite of the bunch, but it's nicely done. There's much more about the sense of potential madness of a guy looking in the mirror and seeing the background of himself being different from what it should be. He doesn't see other people in the mirror. So this is a haunted mirror. And it's much more about the sense of his guy slowly going mad, which is more disturbed than the natural idea of the haunted mirror. Essentially, it's just his mental disintegration. Sort of like Jack Nicholson in The Shining, in a sense of someone slowly going mad and just watching the breakdown, which is the creepy part of it. It's more creepy than the supernatural side of it. Then we have the weakest part, which is the golf story. Everyone knows this is the weakest part. I would say though that it's the execution rather than the idea that's the weakest part. The idea of these two rival golfers who were rivals in love for this woman, and she likes both of them equally. So they play a game of golf to win. One of the guys cheats, and so he wins, but both of them know that he cheated. The other guy commits suicide and comes back to haunt him as a ghost. Now this is all done well, but when they go into the point of the ghost haunting him, and the ghost comes back and it turns out the ghost is incompetent, it's overplayed, and it goes on way too long, and it's like, you're doing well with this silly story, and then suddenly, because there's a really creepy bit where the guy walks into the water to commit suicide, it's very disturbing, and then it becomes this comedy that doesn't pay off the atmosphere of the earlier part, and it just becomes broad, and it's just like you didn't get the second half right. It's too long, it's too broad, there's too many jokes. This guy died and suddenly almost forgiven the other guy, and it's like, this feels like it was about to ratchet up to something else, and then it just became silly and vague, and it doesn't quite work. And even if you want to go to the same conclusion, you need to find a funnier, more interesting, creepier way to do it. It's just this weird thing. It doesn't quite pay off in the second half, but it's okay because the best story's coming, which is the ventriloquist story, the famous ventriloquist story, which is the cover story. Michael Redgrave with the dummy. And he's slowly going mad. Is the dummy possessing him? Is it split personality? Who knows? It's just watching a guy being slowly mad, and just being a head case. And it's like, is the doll alive, or is he imposing his will on the doll? And it's just this creepy thing. Is there's a supernatural take you can take, or there's just a psychological take you can take, and it just works. And he basically saves from the point of view of the guy who he attacks, which gets him in trouble and gets him arrested. And it's just about how he saw the guy from seeing him in Berlin years ago, then seeing him again, and seeing the disintegration, and just the idea of the Redgrave thinks the guy who's also a ventriloquist wants his doll, and just the jealousy and the weirdness, the whole thing. It's wonderfully done. I don't want to explain many more about it. You just have to see it. But it's incredibly well done, and the whole film's incredibly well done. It's just a really well put together film. Try and see it in the biggest screen as possible, just for the atmosphere of some of the sequences. because I would say like number 1, 2, and 5 are the strongest ones just for atmosphere. 3 has a lot of good creepy stuff. The wraparound story is as strong as any of the top stories, and just the golf one's just the kind of weakest one. And again, it's a Charles Creation one, and it goes too far into comedy, and it's just the first half is comedy, but there's also some threat. Something's bad's coming, and just second half just goes off a bit. But so Dead of Night, highly recommended. And finally, we have the Doomwatch, which is basically Doomwatch is a TV show about the environment and all these disasters of science coming back to haunt people. It was a big hit for 3 years, or the first 2 years. Then there was behind the scenes manipulations, and then the third year it went downhill and got cancelled. But during the third season, they'd do a film, but they would bring in for Tygon, and they'd bring in another actor rather than TV stars, just to try and celebrate us. They brought in Ian Bannon, which is probably all they could afford, but Ian Bannon's a good actor, and he adds a nice grumpy touch. So the idea was he's just this new investigator to Doomwatch, amongst these other investigators, so he's just a different one. Either you haven't seen before or he's just new. But he seems to have done a few things before. He goes to this village that's had a leak, an oil leak year before, just to do some checking up on it, basically, to just see if everything's going okay. The idea was he's meant to go for a day, take a few readings, get some samples, then go back home. Just a very dull, typical Doomwatch job. When he gets there, he finds this village and this island. Everyone's acting strange, and he's in a hotel, and he finds it hard to find a hotel room to start with. Everyone obviously wants rid of him, and it's like, what's wrong with him? What's happening here? And a few of them look just a bit odd. And as he's taking the samples the next day, he realises he's being followed. He's like, I'm going to stick around. Something's wrong here. I need to figure out what's wrong. So he sends his samples back, and in Doomwatch HQ they realise there is something wrong there. So they don't get more samples, and more things happen in the village. I'm not going to go, because it's just a new release from 88 Films. I'm not going into all the details of what's happening, but the fun thing with this film is it goes in different direction from where you expect from that setup. It's more of a science fiction thing than a horror thing, but it's interesting. They take some interesting angles to the story and to its resolution, and it's a proper sci-fi story rather than just being a horror story. And Bannon's good in the lead because he's just this grumpy guy who actually means well. He actually, beneath the grumpy exterior, he actually is good at his job and is going to pay attention to detail. He's a proper investigator, and the story of the village, what's happening in the village, is interesting, and there's a lot of unique things going on. It's one of those ones that's like, this is far better than it needed to be for a spin-off to a TV show. They could have done an easy film of it. Instead, they actually just made a more serious film that's more science fiction based in the modern day. Directed by Peter Sasdy, who'd done some good stuff for Hammer, and he's one of those directors who had some good films and bad films in the CV, but when he was on form, he was really good. And these kind of genre stories, and it worked really well. And it's a really good film. It's really solid. The acting is good. The makeup for the 70s is good, and it still works pretty well. They could have had a bit more time for some of the makeups, I think, but it works well for what it's doing, and just the general ideas of it are solid. So that idea is like, I notice in a lot of science fiction films now, they have a good start set of ideas and then they can't follow through. This one, the ideas are solid all the way through. It takes it from the start to a interesting resolution that's consistent through. And there may be a couple of minor quibbles, but the general setup delivers an interesting take on we could go with it, and it's just well done. It's really well done, and I mean, this is the one of the three that you're probably seen Dead of Night. But this is one, if you haven't seen it, see it. It's really solid. It really works, and it's got some nice extras, and it deserves another look because it's a really good little genre film. It did not do well at the time. I think people had Doomwatch had kind of died, and it was no longer the big phenomena. And I think the film, when it came out, did not get good reviews. It was just viewed as a spin-off, and because in Britain in the 70s, genre stuff did not get good reviews. It was below the posh, critics who were above all of this border dash. So it did not do well critically, and the film didn't do that well commercially. But it's had a cult following since then, just like the TV show, and it's definitely worth rewatching because it actually looks more timely now than it did probably when it was made. Although I'm pretty sure when it was made, all of this stuff was already happening. But now it's environmental stuff. It's really very timely. So, yeah, definitely watch Dead of Night if you haven't. Watch Doomwatch. And if you feel like a fun little B movie, Dark Eyes of London is a good show as well. So all three of these films are very enjoyable. But I definitely recommend Doomwatch and Dead of Night more. But that's me for now. I hope you enjoyed this. Bye.